Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Harmony Insights lunch date. You may know my name is Erich Kurschat. I am the owner of Harmony Insights LLC, a company that allows me to work with organizations and consultants using the DISC personality assessment. I am a huge DISC nerd and come by it honestly. All that information is harmonyinsights.com. I'm also the founder of HR Hot Seat, an inclusive mastermind community of, as we say, real HR pros solving real HR problems. And if you are an HR pro or you help HR professionals, I would love to have you in the mix, entirely free, all virtual these days at hrhotseat.com. What you have logged in for today is a Harmony Insights lunch date, something I started doing. I mean, I've been saying a few weeks, but it's well more than a few weeks at this point. 30 minutes out of my lunch hour here in the Central Time Zone to reconnect with friends and colleagues who really inspire me. And today's guest, O'Brien McMahon, is one of those people. He has made the short list. And O'Brien, I want to welcome you to today's Harmony Insights lunch date.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's going to be fun.
In the upper right corner of your screen, you can choose what your view is going to be. I like to keep it on active speaker mode during this half-hour conversation, and then at 12:30 I like to switch over to gallery view so I can see everybody who's with us. So just some thoughts there, other bells and whistles that you can play around with.
I feel like that says a lot about a person, which view mode you choose. I feel like that's a very polarizing thing these days. Everybody's got a preference.
Forget about DISC. We found another way to assess people's personality style.
There you go. It's just binary. You know, are you speaker view or are you gallery view?
No in between.
Yeah.
O'Brien, I am thrilled to have you here. I'm going to encourage you to introduce yourself in a moment, but I want to start by saying, I don't even know if you remember this, but we first met at a Chicago SHRM new member orientation, new in perspective and new member orientation. And you were one of the people that was standing up front welcoming folks, and I came in and was talking to some people, and along the way one or more people said, you have to meet O'Brien if you haven't yet. And I chatted with you. I think I hadn't even yet joined, and I'm still an active member. And you and I talked, had a great conversation. I was hooked at that point, talked to a couple other people, and ended up joining Chicago SHRM. So you feature prominently in my own networking history here in the city of Chicago.
I love it. Even if it was a small role, I'm glad to play it.
We've stayed in touch ever since, and it was really important to me that I invite you back for this conversation, given how inspired I've been by our previous discussions. So why don't you start out by giving people some sense of who you are and what you do these days, and maybe more importantly, why you do it.
Sure. So I'm a senior vice president at Lockton, which is a commercial insurance brokerage firm. So we have there's two divisions to our business. We have the commercial insurance side, which is anything corporate insurance related you'd need. Or we have the other side, which is where I focus all of my time, which is the total reward side of the house. So I work with mid-size, mid-market companies on their employee benefits, their compensation, their retirement plans. We help with perks, PTO, leaves, all that kind of stuff, helping people align the rewards and incentives that they offer with the experience that they're trying to create for their people.
Excellent. Very clear and sets us up well for this conversation. One of my favorite questions is to ask then is why do you do that work? Of all of the things that you could be doing, and you and I have talked about what your wife does, for example, and the artistic things that she's involved with, and I actually know some of your extracurricular interests. Why is it this work with Lockton that gets you so fired up?
So the honest answer is originally it was just a job. And it was open to me, and it provided some of the things that I wanted. And I had a list of things that I wanted from jobs, and it checked off the boxes. But when I was deciding whether to focus on the commercial side of what we do or the benefit side of what we do, the more I got into it, the more I really leaned towards the benefits and total reward side. And I've actually given a lot of thought over the last couple of years to that question of like why I do it and what really charges me up about it. And I really I don't know that I've said this out loud, so we'll see how this sounds. This is the first draft. I really like people and companies who are headed in a direction, like, which might sound weird, but not, so many people and so many companies are kind of going through the motions. They're, living the best they can hour to hour, but they're not really pointed in anywhere. And I like people who are turned on, companies that are turned on, that are focused, that have some goals for themselves and are trying to get there. And the work that I like doing is helping those companies figure out where they're trying to go, or take where they're trying to go, and then harness the people within those companies to align to get there. And rewards and incentives have a big impact on everybody, right? It's the way that we are able to fund our hopes and dreams and the lifestyle we want. It's the way that we protect our families when we get sick, and it's the way we set up our future from a financial standpoint with our retirement program. So I really like that, and I have a passion for kind of all things psychology and human behavior. So it stems outside just the total rewards piece, but that definitely ties in.
I appreciate that context, and honestly, and hopefully this is a takeaway for some of our attendees. As soon as when I asked what you do, I got a sense of what that is. But as soon as I asked why you do it, to me, that is a far more interesting conversation. Like what you just said endears me to you in a way that anything related to sort of the nuts and bolts of what you do, now that becomes important, right? If I'm engaging you in some way, then I'm going to want to know those nuts and bolts. But at least for a sort of a cursory overview of who you are, if we've just met in a networking event, asking you why you do what you do is a much more interesting conversation for me. Do you agree?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And, it can be hard to figure that out because, like I said, I didn't get into this with this like grand aspiration of, changing these companies' trajectory and helping people live out their dreams. But like, as I got into the work, I was like, oh, this really aligns with a lot of the values that I have. And, there are plenty of things that don't really light me up about the job, but there are so many things, the impact that we have does fit with me in so many ways. And I've been able to sort of sculpt the job into something that really does align with something that I like. And so I think a lot of people sort of are like, oh, well, I got to follow my passion, but there's an element too, to like getting into something that's just reasonably close and then working at it and within it and then sort of figuring out your passion.
Yeah.
That
and molding it as you go.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I think it's Mike Rowe, the guy from Dirty Jobs.
Uh-huh.
He has some great posts and videos and stuff on that, and just the value of like hard work and then figuring it out over the course of your career.
He would be the person to talk about that, wouldn't he?
He would, yeah.
Given everything that he has seen.
Yeah.
So I came to you. I only choose my guests. I don't choose our topics. And I came to you and said, O'Brien, I want to talk. What do you want to talk about? And you came up with something that we are calling cutting costs without cutting culture. So give us some context for why this, of all things that you could have discussed with us today, why this is something that's near and dear to your heart.
So in the work that I do, in the work that we're doing right now, so over the last 3 months, it's shifted 180 degrees, as it has for a lot of people. But up until March, we were getting hired with the directive of the war on talent's never been hotter. The economy's riding a 10-year high, and we need to differentiate. And so if we're going to invest more money, where are we going to invest those dollars, and how do we right-size those dollars so that we're making a difference for our people? Fast forward 3 months, and now we got to cut budget. The unemployment is the highest it's been since the Great Depression, and we need to survive this thing or tighten our belts to get through it. And there are 3 camps that are out there that I've seen. There's the ones that the industries that are just on fire, right? Hotels, airlines, those types of travel related industries. And they're going to do whatever they need to do to survive, right? Like they're day to day, they're doing everything that they can. Then there's those groups that in a time like this, their business has been booming. I was talking to somebody from a food distributor the other day, and like they can't onboard people fast enough, right? Their business is booming, and they're fine. They're going to be okay. But there's like a huge middle section where business is getting tight. It's not going to go away. You might not even lose a customer, but like all of your accounts are shrinking. It's going to be tight, and they're going to need to cinch their belts up a little bit and tighten those budgets to get through this. but they will get through it. And a lot of those conversations that I've been having with them is like, if you're going to make cuts, one of the biggest, really the biggest areas are in total rewards, right? You're going to get rid of headcount, which is essentially getting rid of salaries. You're going to cut salaries or compensation. You're going to pare back benefits, which are one of your top 3 or 4 expenses. And you're going to potentially even look at retirement, because that's sort of a, nice to have add-on. And if you can cut some dollars out of that, you're going to do it. And so the levers that get cut immediately, I mean, there's other things, there's like marketing budget, and there's some of that stuff that gets cut too. But the people are really where you're going to save a lot of money, because it's where your biggest expenses are. And I just, everybody was trying to be so strategic before, as they're growing and as they're trying to differentiate themselves. And now it's just like, okay, well, now let's just like line everything up and figure out where we can cut X amount of dollars out of the budget. And I think you have to be as strategic now as you were then, so that you can not only get through this, but you can be in a good position to rebound. And I've talked to a lot of people who are like, yeah, just most companies out there are not thinking about the rebound. They're just planning for the cut period, and they're not thinking about some of the secondary or tertiary impacts that that's going to have on people and culture, and how that's going to prevent them from being able to scale down the road. And so, do you have to make cuts in total rewards? Yes, sure. A lot of people do, but you can be smart about it and thoughtful as you kind of go through that checklist, and make sure that whatever it is that you are going to cut, that you're doing it for a reason, right? That you're thoughtful about it.
And when we're talking using terminology that some people may be familiar with and others might be, this audience often tends towards HR practitioners, but is also a mix of all kinds of people, leaders in all different industries at different levels. You've identified 3 areas that usually define total rewards: salary, benefits, and retirement. Is total rewards a larger bucket than that, or is that typically what people are talking about when they use that language?
So the World at Work defines it a little bit more broadly. It's really I can't think of a technical definition, but it's any benefit, any company provided offering that you would get. So training and development is in there. Succession planning is in there. Mentorship is in there. Those types of things are in the total rewards bucket. For the conversation today, I mean, what we get involved in help with is mainly those 3, though there's some peripheral stuff too. There's some HR technology, there's some perks, there's leaves, there's some things like that. It's PTO. But those 3 are where the big dollars are. You can cut your training budget, but most people's training budgets, if you cut that budget, still wouldn't move the needle in the way that reducing your workforce by 15% would. So that's why we kind of weight those a little bit more heavily.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, that going into or pre-crisis, we'll say people are thinking fairly soundly about things, making good decisions, making strategic decisions, have this whole long-term plan of attack. Suddenly a crisis hits, however defined, and the decision-making process changes a little bit. Mm-hmm. So we have, again, it's a mix of attendees, some people who are in job transition, a number of HR practitioners who may be involved with these conversations. Before we move on, and I want to move on to applicable or practical tips that we can share for people who want to make immediate progress in this area, as we still consider what those challenges are, there are challenges, I would imagine, that are organizational in nature, that are at a very high level, involve a number of people. And there are also challenges that we face as individual contributors, HR professionals and practitioners. Would you be willing to talk more about those challenges at either level? Are you seeing them more from a sort of systemic, all-encompassing sort of level at the highest levels of leadership?
Can you say that again? What type? Can you just
the challenges that we relate to cutting costs and the potential impact that has on culture?
Oh,
I
sure.
think that it's happening. Those challenges are taking place at a couple of different levels. One at a high level, sort of leadership, long-term strategic vision sort of level, and then another level where we as individual contributors, HR practitioners, are going into the workplace saying, how can we contribute to this conversation? I'm being
Yeah.
directed, for example, to cut costs. I'm happy to do so. I understand the benefit to our organization, but I also see the impact that this is going to have on our company culture, both short and long term. Could you speak to either level, or maybe both if we have time,
Yeah.
of
So,
challenge?
I mean, I think HR, if HR is not involved in those conversations up front, I think HR has a great opportunity to get themselves involved in those conversations when it filters down to them. And often that's just by asking some very insightful questions. How, um, what impact is this going to have? Or to be able to say, hey, this is going to have these other impacts. I've thought about this, and there are other ways we can find these dollars. If I can find it and keep those, keep this intact and find it in other ways, how do you feel about that? And so I think HR has an opportunity to show how strategic of a thinker you can be. Um, when it comes to some of the issues that people aren't thinking about, I mean, I think often it's just looking at the highest dollar amount and figuring out where you can add up the total savings that you're looking for with that. And it's kind of like, generally it's like a, sort of a finger in the air, like, how does this feel? And it's, oh, well, we need to cut from our benefits. And so we're just going to raise some deductibles. We're going to increase uh, premium or our contributions, employee contributions. And, where do we want to set them? We can go to here, and that feels about right. I don't think our people will revolt. And I think there are better ways that you can do it. And it starts with, and I feel like this is, no matter what topic you're talking about, it always starts with communication. So communicating to people that the belt is going to need to be tightened up front, I think is helpful. Does it make some people uncomfortable and worried? Sure. But that's where you reinforce it by saying, here's how we're going to make these decisions. Here's the principles by which we're going to make these decisions, and so as to get these positive results, right? So that we're going to preserve as many jobs as we can. We're going to preserve the culture that we stand for, and we're going to get through this together so that we can come out of this and be a better company, right? Like just stating that. And then of course you have to follow up on that. And then just looking at everything, all the decisions that you're making through that lens. So for instance, on benefits, healthcare, instead of saying, oh, we're going to make all of these changes, well, let's model those changes out, but let's do a really aggressive marketing effort this year. Let's take our ancillary lines, let's look at medical, let's take our ancillary lines and let's push hard on the carriers. And let's see, like, is there a carrier out there that's willing to buy our business this year and drop significant dollars from our budget? And, maybe they'll increase it next year, but we can do another marketing effort next year. We're looking for any cost that's not going to impact people right now. And so doing things like that versus just going right at the employees first. When you talk about compensation, a lot of us have heard stories about, it's usually smaller companies where they get all the people together and they talk about, hey, here's the impact, here's what's going on, and here's where we need to get our budget. That means we're going to need to cut X amount of people. And, the people raise their hand and they say, well, what if we all took a pay cut? And people will rally together, especially if leadership is willing to take some of those cuts or take deeper cuts than they're asking their people to take. There are ways that you can still stand for your values and get some feedback on what people find valuable, and then adjust your cuts that way.
I was taking notes while you were talking because you were saying some things that were really making me think. The first thought that came through my head is just the value of being proactive versus reactive. And I'm wondering, given the companies that you work with, do you find that in times of crisis that companies tend to be, and individuals even tend to be, more reactive than proactive? Or do you find that that companies are prepared in some way for something like this that we couldn't have possibly foreseen?
I mean, something like this, everybody is reactive right now. Like there's just, nobody saw this coming and everybody's had to react. And I guess it's how proactively do you react, might be the way to say it. You know, some people right away who were modeling out 10, 25, 50, and 75% cuts to their revenue. And they had a plan for each one of those put in place, and they wrote the plan down, they put it on the shelf. And as their business has adjusted, they just follow the plan. I've seen other people who've said like, I think we're going to be fine. And then now it's kind of like, well, maybe we got to tighten up a little bit, and where can we do it? And, you know, they don't really have much of a plan. And so I think whichever side of that you fall in, whenever you get to the point where you have to make a decision, in my mind, it's important to be making a smart decision. Even if it's a reactive decision, to be able to stop and say, I'm not just going to react and panic. I'm going to react and take a quick second to pause, think about the options, and then pick the ones that are going to set us up in the best way.
You were also talking about leadership. And so that was the second piece that I wanted to mention. So there's the proactive versus reactive, but then communication and leadership and how important that is, that people are in the loop to the extent that they're able to be on the cuts that are taking place, the adjustments that do have to take place, and reassuring people, to the point of our theme today, that culture, however you choose to do so, that culture is not going to be impacted if it doesn't have to be. And hopefully it doesn't have to be. I don't know, maybe there's an argument to be made that in some cases it does, you know, but that communication piece and that leadership piece, if a company has strong leadership, my guess is then that employees will be more welcoming of the news, or more able to embrace it, or to your point, maybe even chip in and contribute in a way that maybe they wouldn't otherwise, because they feel so strongly in how they're being led, how things are being communicated, and their role in keeping the company afloat, or keeping jobs available for themselves and their colleagues. Leadership and communication seem like it's central to this conversation.
Yes.
Easy enough.
I know, but I think about, I think it's Martin Luther King who made the comment, something to the effect of, you know, a man isn't measured by where he stands in good times, but where he stands in bad times or in difficult times. And you really solidify who you are in the eyes of other people in tough times. And so if you're leaning into the difficult situation and you're open and you're engaging your people, they will feel that, right? And they may have some really tough questions, and you might make them really uncomfortable for a short period of time, but people appreciate that. There's a really good book called Essentialism. And the point of that book is sort of unrelated to this, but there's a point I'll make, which is the point there is how to do less better. And it's really how to say no. And one of the things that author talks about is how we're all so afraid to say no because we think it's going to affect how other people perceive us. When in reality, when you ask people, like, we respect people who set their own boundaries, right? Like, we respect people who so know themselves and know what they're about and how they run their lives, that they can say, no, I don't have time for that because I'm doing these other things. Like, we respect that in people. And I think this is one too, like, delivering tough news or having to make cuts or something like that is tough, but we respect people who are willing to do it, as long as they're communicating it and showing that the values that they're communicating are the values that they made those decisions with, right? Like, the worst thing you could possibly do is say, here's all the values we stand for, and then make a bunch of cuts that have nothing to do with those values. Yeah. I gave a talk at the Chicago Shrimp Conference a couple years ago, and I put a slide up that had a shark and a bull, and it was, you know, the punchline was, you know, just like a shark can smell blood in the water, people can smell bullshit all the way across the office. And so, you know, they will, you have to be following through on the things that you say.
Excellent. I've been muting myself to make sure that people aren't hearing the trains that are going by outside,
Oh,
and listening intently to what you're saying, and also keeping track of some of the comments that are coming through. First of all, this is a gallery view audience. We've decided people have chosen gallery view by and large as their view of choice in Zoom, and then also people have chimed in with the book Essentialism. I think it's Greg McKeown, or
yep,
however you say his name, and
yep.
then Sabina even included a link there, and we will put that. Thank you, Sabina. We will put that in a follow-up email to attendees. Um, we blow through the 30 minutes so quickly, and I wish we had so much more time for our conversations. Are there any final either tips or resources that you would like to share before we wrap things up today?
Maybe a couple thoughts as because I took some notes and just a couple thoughts as you're going through each of these different areas. One is, if you're going to have to make cuts, make all the cuts you've been talking about wanting to make anyway. Make those first, right? Like everybody in the organization that you're like, well, this person really is not doing our organization any favors by being here, but like, we're not going to fire them. I don't want to do that. Like, it's okay now to get rid of some of those people and to cut projects that have not been working and to really reassess every element of your business and see, like, is this working? Is this going to help us in the future? And if not, those are the first cuts you should make. I mentioned talking about healthcare and looking at some of the marketing stuff. One of the other things that I see get cut a lot is retirement match. So they'll freeze the match or something like that. And you can save money there, and some people have to do that. And it is a non-invasive way to do it. People don't really feel it that much. But again, go back to whatever your values are. And if you're communicating values that line up with long-term financial savings and financial health and well-being and those types of things, that might not be something that you want to cut. And in fact, that might be something that you want to communicate that you're going to keep on purpose, because when the market dips, every expert I've ever read said that's when you want to be putting money into the market. And so to have the market tank and have everybody's 401k balance go down and then stop the amount of money that's going into those accounts, like, that's not really doing your people any favors either. And again, I'm not judging that. I have clients that have done that. They've decided that versus other cuts is the better of two evils. So that's okay, but just something to think about. I think retirement's so hard to get your head around. We're all so bad at planning that far out into the future, but that's one that you should just have a conversation around. And then if you are a practitioner, the other thing too is just kind of a warning is, if you are on your retirement plan committee, make sure you're still doing all the fiduciary stuff you were supposed to be doing before anyway, because after the market dips, that's where we see the highest amount of litigation, where people sue the company for mismanaging their retirement plans. And if you aren't following the process that you need to follow, you can actually be exposed. And so people will be like, oh God, my hair's on fire. We got all these other things we have to do. I'm not going to do that, sort of boring committee meeting. This is a time where you do have to do that stuff. So not related to culture, but just a warning that I've been providing to people.
Yeah, so helpful. I love when you're talking about when the market tanks, that's when you invest. You were actually saying it quite literally, that you don't want to pull out of 401ks, et cetera, at that point.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this was your implication as well, but just as an analogy of, if morale dips, that's not the time to beat it down any further, to
Yeah.
invest back in your people when they feel like they are at their lowest point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, there's a lot you can do to invest back in your people too, without spending money, right? Like, right. And in fact, it's probably more meaningful to invest time and listen. And I mean, if we've learned anything over the last 10 days in this country, it's that we all have a lot more listening to do. So, I think that's powerful too, just to be investing in the humans in your business, and that can help bolster culture and get you through some of these in a stronger, cohesive group.
I love, before we started today, I was saying, I love that this topic is a little bit different. We've been talking so much about meaningful connection in these lunch dates, and this topic takes us in a slightly different direction. But as it turns out, it still comes back to how connected we are with our leadership and our employees in order to
Yeah.
be able to manage our business and run our businesses. This has been fantastic. We've gone over time by a couple minutes already. I want to make sure that people know how to follow up with you, to pick your brain about
Sure.
how to cut costs without cutting culture, learn perhaps more about Lockton. So how can they find you outside of this conversation?
So LinkedIn, obviously, I do try to at least have a conversation with everyone I connect with before that. So if you send me an invite, I'll probably ask you for a phone call. So don't be offended if I don't accept it right away. But email is always good too. It's just o'brien.mcmahon@lockton.com. There's no apostrophe in my email address. So just o'brien.mcmahon@lockton.com. And then I'll give one shameless plug just with your last comment there. About like, oh, it comes back to the people and everything. So I, 7 weeks ago, started a podcast called People Business, based on the premise that every business is in some way a people business, and it's managing those people that is going to help you be successful or not. And it's so funny how I've had 7 conversations so far with like a diverse group of experts, and like it all comes back to just how to treat people well and how to communicate. Most of it all comes back to communication, and empathy is like pretty much solves 90% of the problems out there.
Excellent. Wonderful point. I love ending on that. I hope that people were as inspired by this conversation as I was. If you were, I would love for you to come back to HR Hot Seat. Nope, let's try something else. harmonyinsights.com/lunchdates and see what else we have coming up. This week on Thursday, I'm going to talk with Brenda Meller on a topic that we've titled How to Unlock the Power of LinkedIn. She does a ton with LinkedIn, is going to share such valuable tips. I'm really looking forward to that conversation. A new friend of mine. And then Tanja Coleman and I on Friday are going to have a conversation that we've titled Leading Through the Lens of Diversity. Something that, of course, is always important, but with everything that's going on right now, I just thought would be a really appropriate conversation. We have a couple more that I'm lining up in the weeks to come on the topic of diversity and inclusion as well. Going into next week, some more, including next Friday with Steve Brown, who is the VP of HR for La Rosa's Pizza in Ohio and frequents the SHRM stage at their national conferences and is such a connector and supporter of the HR profession. So I'm really excited to talk to Steve. And then the following week, Jennifer McClure, the CEO of Disrupt HR, is going to spend some time with me as well. And I can't wait to have those conversations. In the meantime, if you need to go about your afternoon, you're welcome to do so. I appreciate you spending some time with us. If you want to stick around, I'll encourage you to participate at this point. But before anybody goes, I just want to thank you, O'Brien, once again for spending your time with us and being my lunch date for today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And I mean, you do a ton for the community to bring people together, and it's no surprise that you've been able to pivot and do this virtually now as well. So thanks for what you're doing.
Well, that's really kind of you to say. I appreciate that.